Alex, man, there's a lot of things I respect about you. You have built multiple large companies, including a supplement brand that had over $1 billion in sales. And you've done things that everything you've done has been started from scratch, basically. But most of your advertising was exactly opposite of what most other companies do. Like instead of where most companies dump a lot of money into Google and Facebook or whatever, you build companies based on letting your customers showcase their success, which I thought was brilliant. But then you went into getting your brand onto NASCAR and into Indy Racing and into Orange County Choppers. And I want to go deep into all of that stuff and how you built such a strong brand. But everything that you've ever built has been based not just on strong values, but on strong Christian values and focused on improving people's lives. And when I say people, I'm talking about your prospects. I mean, you've inspired millions of prospects, even though they're not even customers of yours. And you've helped millions of customers and over 1,000 employees. And beyond that, I know you've gone very, very deep into helping people who may not even be employees of yours anymore. But when they encounter difficulties either in their own personal life or with their families, you stepped in and you've supported them because you have this true love of everybody in your life. And I've seen this as a constant as long as I've known you, which has been about what, 30 years now. And I've seen you go through massive upswings in that time and even massive downswings, but consistently across the board, you have been a great father, a great husband, a great friend, a great employer, and a giver, even in the hard times. And it's super easy to be a giver in the good times, but you've been consistent no matter what's going on in your life. And I know we're here to talk mostly about your supplement brand, Trim Spa, that sold over 30 billion bottles and hit over $1 billion in sales. But I wanted to acknowledge the fact that everything you've built has been based not on the pursuit of sales as much as it is based on the pursuit of helping others. And what I love about this podcast is that we get a chance to go deep behind the scenes into what most people never freaking see, right? To behind the scenes of a successful brand and of a successful founder. So I am so grateful that you're here and I'm looking forward to this. And before we get into like hardcore business stuff, I want to talk about your day because I know that you spend a lot of time with your family and boating and riding dirt bikes, but you also manage multiple highly successful companies. So if it's okay with you, can we start with like what the heck's a normal day in Alex's life look like?
Well, I guess my normal day starts at the end of the previous day, and it's really important that I get a great night's sleep. I wake up in the morning, not too early. Normally, try to wake up when I finish sleeping. I don't like that opportunity clock waking me up. And start my day with my wife for about an hour conversation over a cup of coffee on our front porch or sometimes in the backyard garden. And then it really varies. My Mondays are my meeting day. So I have all my meetings with all the different team members and kind of go through what their week is going to be like, go through different stuck issues they may have, go through what they're really focused on. And that is my Monday. As to my other days, quite frankly, Chris, my days are pretty easy. I'm very, very fortunate that I have good people in place and I've got an incredible life at this point. So, do I have what I would say is a real typical day? Well, I finish 4 o'clock on the nose. I don't go any longer than four. So I guess that's another thing. I make sure throughout the day I go out into my garden and I walk my garden probably at least 4 times. I have right outside of on my porch. My porch is over a body of water that there's a incredible reef there. I've got fish. I normally feed the fish a couple times a day. There's nothing like looking at those fish, and some of them are 5, 6 feet long, and then some smaller fish. That's incredibly relaxing. I really have a dream day.
And how does that feed into things? So for example, again, you and I have been go back a little ways and early on, this was not your personality. Like you've always led things from the same heart, but at a different speed. Like when I first started in business, probably similar to the time that you first started in business, like I was focused on a million things and my day looked totally different. Like I'd wake up and immediately go into things and not give myself the downtime to actually become clear that I've learned is so freaking important these days. What lifestyle do you believe is better for growing a company?
I think it really depends on your age. I think when you're in your late teens and your 20s and you don't have any kids, you don't have a wife, you got to be putting in 80 hours a week. if you take those hours and you learn some real focused area and you become phenomenal in that one focused area. You don't want to be someone that is great at everything. If you're great at everything, it means you're probably not good at anything. You want to be good, figure out that one thing that you're going to be out of this world extraordinary at. Put all your energy into that one thing, and that's going to make a big difference. And one of the things that you have to know is where you're not good. So many people feel that it's important to have broad skill sets. And when you first start off in business, broad skill sets are important. However, as you grow in business, you want your skill sets to be more focused and more focused and more focused. You want to own one thing. And if you can own one thing and be better than anybody on the planet in that one thing, the likelihood is you're going to be very successful. And also, you're going to be successful because you're going to teach your team members how to become really great at just that one thing. And if you can teach your team members to become great at one thing because you're a great example of that, you're going to develop a team that in every area that's important to your business has these extraordinary abilities.
Yeah. So I think I have to stop on that. Like that has been so pivotal inside of our companies. Like it's been pivotal in the mindset that we've had in the companies, the growth of the companies, everything. And it may have leaked into my life from talking to you for so long. But because I'm the kind of person who likes to manage a million things, and growth has always come significantly faster when I focus on the one or two things that I need to focus on, and I surround myself with absolutely amazing people, which is a maturity thing. It's an experience thing. It's not something that I think when I was in my 20s, I would have never been able to surround myself with great people in my life because I didn't know what to look for. I was looking for people who were like me, which is not the way I hire these days. I hire people who are absolute experts at the one thing they need to own inside of that box on the org chart and also fit into our value system so that we as a team can keep pushing forward.
Chris, you just said two things that I think are really important. One is you said you like to manage people. I don't like to manage people. I believe management should be done with unmanagement. When you have to manage people, people don't like to be managed. They just don't like it. They like freedom. People cherish freedom. Give people freedom. So how do you do that? I hate managing, for example, sales. I like to manage activity. I like to hear about people's activity. When a person doesn't close the sale, I'm not going to go out there and say, wow, that's horrible. You didn't close that sale. I'm going to give them credit and recognition for trying. Or even more than that is so often a company gets upset when someone loses money for that company because they tried something and it didn't work. I want to recognize that person for trying something. They don't feel great about wasting money, about some sales campaign not going well. Give them recognition for trying something. I always say to my team, if we're not making mistakes, we're not growing. We've got to constantly be making mistakes. That's real important. So how do you manage people with unmanagement? Well, one thing is you go and recognize people for the areas that they are doing absolutely incredible. Well, how do you punish people? Simply praise them just a little bit less. When you have a person that's being praised and somebody next to them is not being praised, they start to crave that praising and they crave it and their behaviors naturally change. And you don't have to tell them they're doing a lousy job. I mean, here and there, sometimes you have no choice, but you have to tell people they're doing a lousy job. But that should be the last thing that you do. It shouldn't be one of the first things that you do. So I think one of the reasons that I have a really great life is because I don't manage my people. I just don't. I let the system manage. I let our values manage. I let everybody else manage people. So how does that look? Well, when we start our meetings, one of the first things that we do is we have our different team members recognizing other team members for things that they did to get them unstuck. And if you want to grow a company at a fast pace, if you can just simply master one thing, and that is getting people unstuck quickly, you're going to grow at a much faster pace. Because when somebody says, I can't do this because so-and-so is doing something or so-and-so hasn't done their job, that stifles growth. You want to unstuck those issues immediately. So the team starts recognizing each other and people crave that recognition. And they don't want to be that person on the Monday meeting that is making somebody else stuck.
Yeah, I will reiterate that. The number one reason any company has ever plateaued inside of any of the companies I've ever had is one person. It's because one person got stuck or one person. And in our meetings, like we'll go over just a handful of things that everybody comes prepared to talk about in every single meeting. One of those things is what's an obstacle that you're facing. And what we found is that people who come to meetings consistently with no obstacles, they're the ones we have to focus on the most because there's always a friggin' obstacle. And an obstacle that goes unannounced to the rest of the team is an obstacle that somebody is having and they're trying to battle through themselves, which means they get slower getting other things accomplished and they slow the rest of the team down eventually, very, very quickly.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
We're on the same page there.
Hey, that leads into something that you said a long time ago, which I've quoted you on multiple times. It is comfortable methods bring uncomfortable results, and uncomfortable methods bring comfortable results, which I think is brilliant. I think you made that up. I give you credit for it all the time. But can you speak about that as it relates to team members?
Well, how about I talk about in terms of just life? I've said for years and years that the greatest gifts that we get in life that God gave us are gifts that we all have. Having a beautiful car, having a beautiful home, that's not exactly a gift that God gave us, but the most valuable gift that God gave us is something that we can use every single day, but we take for granted. I've had the good fortune to have worked. I mean, we've had NASCAR and you see these race cars have extraordinary power, incredible power. I like to lift weights. I've seen people with extraordinary strength. There's so many amazing powers on earth, but there's nothing more powerful than words used properly and effectively. There's nothing more powerful, but at the same time, words are the most powerful force on earth and they're the weakest force on earth. Well, how can they be? Well, words from someone that doesn't keep their word, words from someone that just says things like, I hate when people go out there and say, I'll do anything for you. If you ever need something, I'll be there for you. I can guarantee those people are the people that will not be there during a time of crisis because they take words for granted. But people that take words and the meaning of that word is incredibly important and they are very careful with how they select words, those are the people that people are going to develop a trust in, that are going to inspire people. But the truth of the matter is that these words can make such a huge difference in people's lives, but the people's lives that they actually affect the most is your own life. I always say that you are a victim of your self-talk. If you can sit back and listen to your self-talk and control that self-talk, you're going to control the quality of your life. And it's all about words. Don't take words for granted. They're by far the most powerful force on earth.
Hey, so one of the most important skill sets that I think anybody could ever develop in business is clarity, focus, right? Being clear on what you need to focus on, which I think stems from what you just said. Being so diligent on the words that you use that guide your thoughts, that guide your feelings, that help you to take the actions necessary to go forward, right? So please go deeper on self-talk and how because you and I have had very, very deep conversations about this over decades, and we're both on the exact same page on this. And I don't think either one of us speaks about it a lot, but it's something that we definitely have inside of our lives, and we both believe wholeheartedly in it. And I know that you do this with your sons, with your wife in a very good way, that you try to emulate or you try to lead by example. And I try to do the exact same thing with my kids. So let's talk about self-talk a little bit.
Sure. Well, just mention kids. I don't think there's anything in life that is more important than raising great kids. That is our number one job. I think we're put on this earth to be able to raise great kids. And I'm very, very fortunate that I have great kids. But talking about the power of words, I think probably one of the most important skill sets a person can ever master is the skill of being resourceful. And so what's the temptation of working with people? The temptation as a manager or as a father is to give people the answer to a problem. I love dirt bikes. My kids love dirt bikes. And my kids will say, "Hey, Dad, how do I fix this?" And instead of going out there and telling them how to fix it, I go out there and say, use your resourcefulness, plain and simple. Now, if I just went out there and said that, that would feel pretty cold. But what I do is I actually tell a story, and I've told the story many, many times. There's a great book by Brad Smart on what it takes to be a great CEO. And in his first rendition of his book, he said the most important skill set is resourcefulness. And I thought about that, and I said, well, if that's really important for a CEO, that's certainly important for everyone. So I told my kids the story about how important resourcefulness is. And I said, if there's anything that I could leave in your life, that is developing your resourcefulness. So you may get mad at me at times, and I may not develop a friendship, or there may not be a bond at a certain time because I don't sit there and work on your dirt bike and show you how to fix it. But 5 years later, 10 years later, when you're fixing your dirt bike or you're fixing your whatever, you're dealing with some sort of problem, and you have developed that resourcefulness muscle in your head, you're going to remember me. So I don't give in to the temptation of instant gratification, as so many people do. I mean, what do friends normally do? Friends normally want to be there for one another. A father, a business leader, doesn't want to be there for their people or for their sons. They want to develop their people. They want to develop their sons. So you have to really think. Don't give into that temptation of immediately coming up with the answer. As a matter of fact, I normally say in my meetings to my team all the time, I say, I'm not good at most things. So if somebody comes to me with a problem, I go out there and say, oh my gosh, that is an unbelievably difficult problem. Now, inside, I may be saying, wow, if I had a problem like that, you know what I would do? I'd go out there and celebrate. Let me show you what a real problem is. That's the temptation, but I don't give in to that temptation. I don't answer that problem. I say, you have any ideas on how to solve that problem? And a person shares an idea. I say, wow, that is a great idea. You have any other ideas? Well, I got this idea. I said, wow, that is a great idea. You have any other ideas? And they say, yeah, I got this idea. I said, wow, those are incredible ideas. Well, good luck. Let's see what you come up with. And even if they come up, the temptation is if they come up with an idea that you don't like, what do you want to do? Is you want to say, well, you really should do it this way. But you know what you just robbed them of? You just robbed them of pride of ownership. That's stealing. That's a horrible thing to do. I'm not ever going to do that. I'm going to give people the pride of ownership because you know what, Chris? Overall, as much as you think this solution is the best solution, maybe your experience says this solution is the best solution. It may not be. Get yourself off of that pedestal thinking you're so much smarter than everybody else and let them come up with the solution. And when they come up with the solution, they're going to be proud, they're going to feel good, and you're going to build their confidence. So in other words, what are you doing is you're building leaders.
And that goes back to that saying, what the heck is that? There's good decisions, bad decisions, and no decisions. Good decisions are, wonderful. Bad decisions can be fixed. Somebody who can't make a decision, that's a problem. So when you're sitting down in front of your people and they become decision makers, good or bad, you could fix a bad decision maker, but they're making decisions at least. They're action takers. Somebody who sits there and just can't do it and they consistently come to you for the same challenges, like that's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember some of the most incredible memories in managing people is I had one marketing director that came to me with her resignation, and it gets me emotional just thinking about it. But I read her resignation. I said, you're telling me that you just made this couple $100,000 mistake? You just had a couple $100,000 learning lesson and you're quitting on me? I'm not taking that resignation. Get back to work. People make mistakes, but I never met a person that's a good person, that's a quality team member that made the mistake on purpose. They believed that was the right thing to do. And I'm going to cherish that. I'm going to appreciate that. Weak management, they get upset at that. No, I don't get upset about it. I appreciate it. As a matter of fact, I try to encourage people doing big, bold things. And when I think about it, it's kind of like, you have a vision for a company. And, back when I was building Trim Spa, I said, what can I do? What is the most important thing that I can do in creating a vision for Trim Spa? I mean, I thought about it, I thought about it, I thought about it. And a lot of times it's the simplest things. It's like, one of our values is nothing is. Now, people like say, "Well, nothing is." Well, it started out, nothing is good or bad, thinking makes it so. Well, then we said, nothing is good or bad. And then we said, nothing is. And that immediately gets people thinking about that value. Make it simple. So I said, well, we want to do a trim spa. We want to weave trim spa through the fabric of America. That was it. That was a vision, I don't know, 30 years ago or so. And we just talked about that over and over and over again. And the team started to focus on trying to weave trim spa through the fabric of America. And we did some pretty darn extraordinary things when it came to doing that. And that led us to a number one brand. Now you may say, well, Alex, why didn't you go out there and say your goal is to do $1 billion in sales? Well, because every company has that goal. That wouldn't make us any different. What company doesn't have a goal to be number one? I mean, that's like, of course. Well, what's going to make us unique? What's going to make us different? Well, if we weave Trim Spa through the fabric of America, we're going to get a lot of sales. And we're going to get people really to focus on what our mission is. So, and once again, that goes back to the power of words. It makes such a huge, huge difference. You got to pick them carefully, slowly, think about them. Don't just think about every single word. I mean, certain words can be incredibly damaging. There's certain words that if somebody comes into my office or in one of my meetings and they say that word, I don't even have to scold them anymore because everybody else scolds them. We don't allow those words.
Like what?
Like try. I hate the word try. It's such a horrible, horrible word. Instead of saying, I'm going to try to do this, I'm going to do it. It's the trying is attempting. So if you try to pass me a piece of paper, you're going to be going like this. Passing a piece of paper, you actually pass it. Now, to the conscious mind, it's obvious. Your conscious mind has the ability to reason, figure things out. So it says, all right, so trying means to pass. But to the subconscious mind that takes everything literally, trying means attempting. And that's kind of an obvious bad word, but there's many other types of words that are not quite as obvious that you want to be very careful about.
Hey, I want to talk about that, but I want to spin it a little bit because one of the things that we've done a lot, and this is not this doesn't go back that far, maybe a decade inside of our companies, is we've consistently started using words and phrases when we talk to our team in the pursuit of getting them to absorb those words and use them in their own life. So it's now net part of their vocabulary. Because what I found is I can use powerful words with people and I could omit words and stop people from using words at times. But when they're doing it, like you're saying, the whole rest of your team jumped in. As soon as anybody uses the word try, the rest of your team jumps in because because it's part of them, right? It didn't become part of them in the beginning. You were probably explaining it and explaining it and explaining it. And eventually somebody else, probably your number two or your number three or somebody else started doing it. And then everybody else wants to elevate. They want to talk like the people that they respect inside the company. And it just subconsciously becomes part of their vocabulary. And when it subconsciously becomes part of their vocabulary, whether it's a power word or if it's a poor word that they omit, either one of them changes the dynamic of everything. Their interactions with their team, their interactions with prospects, with customers, and with their family.
But the most important interaction is with themselves.
Exactly.
There's nothing more important. And that's what I say to people. What you have to do is you have to tune into your self-talk. You need to take moments throughout the day and you got to listen to that self-talk. And if that self-talk is wrong, you've got to get that self-talk corrected. And that is your number one job all day long, all your whole entire life is you want to control that conversation that you have with yourself. The quality of that self-talk determines the quality of your life.
Which is difficult. Like it's one of the most difficult things, in my opinion, to really understand self-talk because there's times where, like, I don't know about you, like maybe you're sitting on your boat by yourself or with your kids or you're spearfishing or you're doing something and your brain has the ability to relax for a little bit. We go into this place called silence. And then all of a sudden these ideas, these things pop into our head that are not really good. So it is difficult to, and I'm going to use a term that is a very used term, but stand guard at the door of your mind. So that when these things do come in that are counter what we want our brain to be focused on, there has to be something set up, at least in my life, that I am able to pull that out and replace it with something else, something more positive, whether that's refocusing on a business thing I'm doing, refocusing on the people that I'm sitting with right at that moment, prayer, whatever it is, there's got to be something that positively replaces that negative thought.
Yeah, Chris, I hate to use the word it's difficult. I rather go out there and say that it's simple, but not easy. So I say to my people over and over and over again, the attributes it takes to succeed in business and in life are so basic and so simple that a lot of times they appear to be almost ridiculous. And because they do, most people are not willing to do them, and they never have even a chance of success
Sad.
in business or life. And so it's simple, but it's not easy. So why is it not easy? Because the temptation is to go out there and use the wrong word. But it's simple because you recognize it pretty quickly. How does that look? So you're in the middle of your day and you're working your tail off and you're not paying attention to your self-talk. So you're having a conversation. Your self-talk is controlling your behavior. And that's kind of what most people do all day long. Well, take your day and break it up. Like I said, I'll walk through my garden at least 4 times a day. When I walk through my garden, I'm now relaxed. I'm smelling my flowers. I'm maybe pulling a few weeds. I'm admiring nature. And while I'm doing that, I'm listening to my conversation that I'm having with myself in that relaxing time. And I kind of start to realize, shoot, I kind of screwed up an hour ago or a half hour ago. But let me start working on that. Let me fix that. And I fix that conversation. And now I come back to work and I'm much more efficient. It's like one of the most important things is you have to have belief in yourself. You can't go and doubt yourself. But at the same time, you have to understand what you should believe in. So what does that mean? Well, you don't want to believe in your broad range of skills. You want to believe in your focus skill. Whatever is that skill set that is what you are owning. This is what you are a master at. Great. Consider that you're a master at that area. Develop that area, but recognize that you're probably blind everywhere else. That's right, you're blind. And you want to recognize you're blind because if you know that you're blind, you do 2 things. Number one is you become much more self-aware. You don't want to develop your blind areas. Sometimes you may, but most of the time you don't want to develop your blind areas. You want to hand off your blind areas. But if you don't know exactly where you're blind and exactly where you're skilled, then you're putting your nose into places that you shouldn't put your nose into. And so what does that mean? That means you are destroying the efficiency of your organization or your family or your relationship with someone. You don't want to do that.
And so this has to be on your radar for every area of your life.
Absolutely.
That
Every area of my life. As a matter of fact, the most important area of my life is my life with my family, with my kids, with my wife, my friends, and I actually, before that, I should say my relationship with the Lord. That's number one. Family's number two, and business is a far number three. Now, it wasn't always that way. In my 20s, business was number one. I'm not proud to say that. I'm a little embarrassed to say that because my priorities were off. But in some ways, I'm okay with it because I paid an extraordinary price. I worked 80 hours a week, developed my skill sets. And by the time I was 30, I was working no more than 40 hours a week. And insanely successful, making more money than I could ever have dreamed of. And money's not everything. Money's not everything. As a matter of fact, as I get older, I realize it's less and less important. There's only so many steaks that you can eat. And, a lot of times we measure people by how much money they make, as opposed to measuring people by the difference that you make in another human being's life. I mean, there's nothing greater than being able to make a difference in another person's life. They have blood flowing through their veins. They breathe. They got feelings. They're like you. And if you can make another person's life just a little bit better, and you can touch a lot of people that way, that's success.
which brings us back to exactly where we started, which is everything that I've ever known you to do. And we've sat and we've talked and we've broken bread together and we have we've traveled a lot together. I've never heard you, which is really a monumental thing to say, I think, especially to an entrepreneur. I've never heard you speak poorly of your team, your company, your employees, your family, anything. Yet I've sat with a lot of other entrepreneurs and when I travel different places, when I speak on stages, and it's the exact opposite. And those people are never what people I would consider fulfilled or happy or joyful. They're always people who are constantly searching for more, constantly looking to the next thing that they could achieve that they're going to have happiness. I think it comes down to you have a personal set of values. And I don't know this for a fact. I'd love to talk about this. If your personal values influenced or even are the same as some of your values in business.
I would say they're pretty much almost exactly the same. Yeah, very much so. I mean, how can you have a different value in business and a different value in life? Well, I mean, one of the business values is we do more with less, and I'm just naturally frugal. I grew up with parents that made it through the war. They were both in work camps, concentration camps. They had a very, very difficult life, and that is something that is definitely instilled in me, but I kind of look at it as a really great thing. I mean, why waste money? Why, you know, instead of wasting money, give it to the poor, give it to church. So yeah, I would say I'm trying to think of overall the values I live my life by. I mean, I'm a big believer in, I think probably there's so many things that are the most important thing. So I'm going to just warn you, I'll probably say something else that is the most important thing. But at this moment, the most important thing is this, what I'm going to share. And it's a value that, it's that I actually cherish more today than ever. And my gosh, should I ever cherish it in my 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s? But I cherish it even more. It's grown. I understand the importance of this value is more clear than it was back then. And back then it was very, very clear. And it's maybe the most important value that you can develop if you want to be successful in life, in business or whatever. And that's what I call the little bit more principle. Or maybe a better way to say it is what I call the law of insignificance. And that is that so often everybody is looking for some big, big thing that's going to make a huge difference in life. But it's not any big thing. It's these little things. We talked about words. If you can just go out there and change slowly every day the conversation that you have with yourself, just take a negative thought and turn it into a positive thought and do that day after day after day. After one day, your life is going to be exactly the same. It'll be insignificant change. After a week, it'll be an insignificant change. But after 6 months, it'll be a huge change. In marketing, so often we're looking for this one marketing thing that's going to make all the difference in the world. I don't want to celebrate something that's going to make a 20% difference. If you do something that makes a 20% difference, you know what you really are recognizing? You're recognizing that your company is pretty bad. You want to celebrate things that make a 0.5% difference and a 1/4% difference. And this little difference, because all those little things add up to a huge amount. I remember when we first got involved in radio, we were perfecting our radio ads and perfecting our radio ads and perfecting them. And we got them finally to a point that we thought they were pretty darn good. And at the time, we also hired some of the best people in the world to try to help us perfect these radio ads. We hired Gary Halber, we hired Josh Bizzoni, we hired Joe Polish, Kennedy, a whole bunch of people. And they couldn't get that ad to improve. They couldn't get it any better than we got it. So I started to say, what else do we have to improve? And I said, we got to improve our call center. If we can get our average order to $130 and keep our closing rate the same, that'll make all the difference in the world. Well, our average order at the time was something like $70. That's a big, big difference. We didn't jump from $70 to $130 like this. We battled, we fought, hired people, did all different things. And slowly and slowly and slowly, we finally got up to $130 by making these little tiny improvements. Some of the improvements were technology. We got a better predictive dialer. Some of the improvements were better marketing material. Some of the improvements were better scripts. Some of the improvements were keeping people motivated. There's all these little things and they add up. It's never, the difference between, we just had the Kentucky Derby. And if you watch the Kentucky Derby, the difference between first place and second place was just a little bit. But that little bit made that horse worth millions and millions of more dollars. In life, If you can just every day get a little bit better, or turtle, a little tiny bit better, make that a goal. Make it a goal to have a better relationship with your kids, better relationship with your wife, better relationship with your friends, to be more careful with the selection of words that you choose, that when you talk to people, that you truly use the right word for the situation that you can stand behind. All those little things over time, they add up to a huge, huge difference.
Absolutely. Amen. Hey, let's go a little bit deeper on something that you said in there. You started to talk a little bit about marketing, and man, you have done some pretty amazing things with marketing. What I call out of the box things. And that's something that I'm very, very passionate about. I want to zig when everybody else is zagging. I want to avoid the normal platforms, and I want to go to the more unique platforms, because that's where there's less competition for my target audience. That's where people believe you a little bit more. And instead of coming to your website with their arms crossed, trying to figure out what you're going to try to sell them, they come to you arms open, looking for more information. Would it be okay if you just go out there and share some of the unique things that you have done? We started this show talking about your NASCAR and Indy and Chopper. Let's talk about Orange Chopper first, and then you could go deeper into anything else.
All right. So before I talk about that, because I kind of feel like I'm bragging, I want to talk about what I think is really important. And that is that I believe one of my competencies is marketing. So that's one of my competencies. So in other words, that's an area I'm really, really good. However, I've learned over life that as good as I am in this competency, my instinct is way off. So many times Chris said, I love this marketing piece, and it flopped. So many times I wrote something that I thought was phenomenal, and it flopped. As a matter of fact, I really can only think of one thing that I did when it comes to marketing that was phenomenal. Really one thing that I own, that I created. So most of these things that really worked out incredibly well was we had a control and we tested off to the control. And we constantly test off that control and test off that control and test off that control and look for little tiny things. Orange County Choppers, I mean, in a lot of ways, that was kind of lucky, to be truthful. I'm not super proud of it. It's great to talk about, but you know what I'm really proud of? I'm really proud of taking a piece and adding something to it that made it respond 3% better. Like, for example, in our print advertising, we wrote on our pieces, try it because it works. And that increased by something like, I don't remember exactly at the time, but like 5-6%. Or we went out there and we hired Tom McMillan, who was the former head of President Clinton's Council for Physical Fitness and Sports, and we added him as an endorsement to our ads. And he said something to the effect, yeah, you have to go to the seminar. And I also own a seminar company that does about, that does thousands of seminars per year, local seminars. And that's kind of where things started back in my late 20s or my mid 20s. And that was a real cash generator for a lot of the other things that we went out there and did. So those little things really make such an enormous difference. That's something you have control over. So as far as Orange County Choppers, our goal was to weave trim spot through the fabric of America. I love motorcycles. I went to the motorcycle show in Jacob Javits, and I saw the Orange County display. And prior to that, I knew that they had the #1 Discovery show, but it was a brand new show that was starting. And I said, and they built like a fireman motorcycle, and they built a police motorcycle, and also they built this Spider-Man motorcycle. And I said to them, how about you build me a corporate motorcycle? And we started talking about doing that as part of the Discovery show. And I got that motorcycle for $150,000 with 2 1-hour episodes on Discovery Channel's #1 show at the time. And after that, they charged for every other company between $1.5 million and $2.5 million. So it was, no question about it, phenomenal opportunity. And we got lucky, but it's always better to be lucky than skilled in life. But we've done some other kind of cool things. We had someone during a New Year celebration on TV propose, and then when they proposed in TV, they said that they lost their weight with trim spot and spurred quite a bit of sales. Or, one of the things that we did is we would do a lot of event marketing. And every year at the Super Bowl, we would have our show cars, our show motorcycles, kind of the trim spa lifestyle on display. We had our trim spa models, and we would have volleyball games between the trim spa models and the Hawaiian Tropic models, and the monster, what is it called? Monster beverage models, and some of the other brands that use models, and that always ended up being one of the big events at the Super Bowl. And of course, the Super Bowl is the big event, or we would give out awards to different athletes and different parties at the Super Bowl. So we actually got to the point with our event marketing that we became an attraction. So initially, we had to pay to bring our trim spa lifestyle to different events, but we became such an attraction that we actually started getting paid for doing that. Something I'm quite proud of.
That's amazing. And you did very, very well with endorsements also. So getting regular people, regular everyday people to use it. And then I'm going to use the wrong word here. So correct me when I use this word, contest. The contest, was it a contest, or is there legally a better term to use for that you did with, where you gave away cars?
Well, we had a lot of different contests. One of the contests we had contests that took place throughout the United States in bars that led to the Trim Spa American Dream pageant. So people would come to the bars, and they would, mainly women, they would compete. And then twice a year, we would have an event in the Bahamas, and they would get a modeling contract for trim spas. That was, something we did contest wise. We had a makeover contest where we gave out cars and we gave out money. As a matter of fact, that's where kind of we tried to get Joe Polish and Josh Pizzoni to kind of share some of their ideas that they did with Bill Phillips on how to run a really great contest. I'm not going to say that part of it we became really great at. It was something that we were still perfecting. I don't think we became great at it, but we did become really great at weaving the brand into America. And, that was our main goal.
Yeah. So you and I have had a conversation about a very, very small aspect of marketing that makes a very, very profound difference in any of our marketing. And I think it's something that, and I'd be curious if you think the same thing. I think it's something that almost any company that does B2C, even B2B, but almost any company that does B2C can increase their conversion by incorporating more properly placed testimonials.
Sure. Testimonials are huge. We did massive amount of testing on testimonials. So one of the big complaints that we always had is we had got a lot of complaints that we had before and afters that were in bathing suits or bikinis. So we said, you know what, let's get away from these bikinis. So we did a bunch of testing. We had focus group testing, and sure enough, in the focus group testing, the women especially didn't like the bikinis. But then when we actually rolled out the ads, if they weren't in bikinis, the women especially would say, well, I really couldn't tell if she lost the weight. It looked like her clothing covered things up. It would be better if we could have seen a little bit more, so it was interesting how the women were the most critical about that. I guess the lesson learned is you're going to have people complain about certain things. You should be sensitive to those complaints. You should listen to those complaints. But ultimately, you've got to have your marketing constantly testing off that control. Whatever is your best piece, all right, let's try a marketing piece that doesn't have the bikinis. Let's see how it does. And it did absolutely horrible in comparison. It wasn't just, a 5% decrease or a 10% decrease. It was like a 30 or 40% decrease. So, testimonials are huge. You still to this day continue to use testimonials. People, they love stories. And, the other thing about a testimonial is they're real. It's like, if you try to recreate a testimonial, it's never like that person speaking. Why? Well, they may have a unique voice, or they may have a unique story, or a unique phrase, or a unique way of saying things. I learned that when we were advertising on Howard Stern, and we thought we had some really great ads. And an ad on Howard Stern, I was running about $30,000 an ad. and we were making money with a $30,000 ad, which we ran normally at least daily, if not a couple times a day. But then we got one of the DJs, Cabby, that lost quite a bit of weight, and he gave his testimonial. And the very first time he shared his testimonial, the phones lit up. They lit up. So he said, that's kind of interesting. So he said, let's create a spot with Cabby. And we created the spot with Cabby, and he kind of told us what he wanted to say. And then we readjusted it, had our lawyers look at it, had our marketing people look at it. We told him he had to stop yelling and screaming so much. It was horrible. It worked just as good as all our other ads. So then we started to say, you know what? We're not that smart. Let him yell and scream. As much as we hate it, everybody liked it. So he's going to yell and scream. Let him yell and scream. You know, our most celebrated success story is Anna Nicole Smith. I never wanted to have Anna Nicole Smith as a representative of our brand. Never. I hated her show. I was like, she's not my type of person, but she was hurting. She was in pain. She needed love. So we said, let's have you try Trim Spot. And she tried it, had extraordinary success. It was no deal. It was just a matter of trying to help somebody, genuinely try to help somebody. Gosh, when that story came out, sales went from about $30,000 or $40,000 a day in our call center to over $300,000 a day, literally within seconds.
That's amazing. And you think it's because it was so genuine and so truthful.
Well, I think it's because in the case of Anna, she was the best before you could ever get. Yeah. There was no better before. I mean, everybody knew that she was out of control. She had no willpower, that nothing would work for her. No other weight loss brand would probably ever want to associate themselves with Anna, because the likelihood is it wouldn't work, but it worked incredibly well. And I think it's probably the greatest weight loss story in the history of Americana. Still to this day, every time one of her specials come out, we sell a massive amount of Trim Spa.
Hey, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to speak about one of the stories that we've talked about with Anna Nicole Smith, because I think it has a lot to do with the marketing aspect that we're talking about right now. So we were talking about at one point, just, friend to friend sharing, well, how did you leverage that? How did you get that? What do you think the pros and cons were with that? And you said something, and I'm going to get this wrong, so please, expand upon this in the right way. And you told me, hey, listen, we did a lot of things. We tested a lot of things with Anna, and most of them very, very positive, because she was always out in the press. She was always doing something in the press. And you noticed that the one consistent with her was that she always wanted to be in front of a camera. So instead of doing anything, forcing her to do anything, asking her to do anything, whatever, you went out there and bought her something that you knew she would love and that she would want to showcase all the time, especially when she was on camera. You bought her a necklace that said Trim Spa, and she loved it so much not because it was necessarily a piece of jewelry, but because it came as I don't know, not as a congratulations to losing the weight, but it came from your heart. And it was, hey, here's this thing. You're such a great friend of ours. You're such a great spokesperson for the brand. This has nothing to do with payment or anything. Here it is. Thank you very, very much. And she cherished it so much that she wore it on camera all the time. And that got you tremendously more press. Maybe you weren't even thinking about it like that, but that's what ended up happening.
Well, we were thinking about it like that, of course. At that time, we were leveraging Anna any way we possibly could leverage Anna. But Chris, I think the most incredible story about Anna is this. One time I was having this conversation with Anna, and we were at this event in which we had a bunch of photographers in front of us, probably about 30 or 40 photographers. And they kind of there's one group that was sitting on the ground, another group was kneeling, another group that was standing. Anna was in the middle. My wife was on one side of Anna, and I was on the other side of Anna. No, I think, I don't remember where Anna was, but I think my wife was next to me. So they asked if we can do a photo session. So we said, sure, we'll do this photo session. And so we're doing a photo session, and I'm not very good at photo sessions. I'm horrible. I got basically one pose, and it's a horrible pose. And that's all I have is one pose. So, all right, so photo session, I figured, 10 seconds later, it's over. So I kind of ran out of poses. I didn't know how to pose after that. So now I look next to me, my wife is posing, and I look over there and Anna is posing, and I'm like, wow, let me try to do some more posing. So I'm trying some things, and then I see Anna doing things like this, when moving her head a certain way. And I tried to do it, but I felt so awkward. I couldn't do it. I really couldn't. I saw my wife, Monique, kind of like doing it for a while. So, a minute goes by, and pretty much I was done posing. I couldn't pose anymore, and my wife couldn't pose anymore. And then we start watching Anna, and she goes on for like another 15 minutes. And there's a photographer in the front row that said, there's no one better than her. There's no one better than her. And it dawned on me, like, you can take anything in life and perfect that skill set and make a lot of money. That's such a great example. So I said, Anna, I said this later. I said, Anna, how the heck do you know so many different poses? How do you do that? It's a question I would never have even thought of asking anybody until seeing this in real life. And she said, Alex, when I was a little girl, my mother used to tell me all the time how ugly I was. Damn. Yeah. And I would go into my room, look in front of the mirror, and she was bawling her eyes out, posed, trying to make myself look beautiful. And I posed and I posed and I posed over and over, hours in front of that mirror. And in person, I don't think Anna is beautiful. In front of the camera, gosh, she could make her face look beautiful. And she knew every pose to make herself beautiful. Never forget that. It's ingrained into my life. She really was not as stupid as people think.
Yeah. You've said that many times in the past.
She was very shy, very, very shy, but it was weird. She was shy, but in front of the camera, she was not shy. But off the camera, she was shy. As a matter of fact, in the very, very beginning, she didn't want to talk to me. I only could talk to her through Howard, her attorney. Yeah. Anyway, I don't really remember exactly the story you were talking about as far as that necklace. I mean, there were so many things that we did with Anna to try to get additional media attention. So the necklace was one thing. I mean, we brought her to NASCAR races. We had her wear like a NASCAR outfit that got incredible amount of attention. We had her on one of our trim spa buses traveling the country doing different events. We did events with with a lot of different celebrities. One of our favorite celebrities that we did events with on a regular basis was John Daly. People don't know this, but John Daly is a really, really great singer, phenomenal singer. And we had a deal with Broken Bow Records in which we would take a lot of their talent and we would have them travel with us. So we had a stage and they would sing on top of our stage. And one of the country singers is Craig Morgan, that today is probably one of the top 10 country singers in the world or in the United States. But Craig Morgan and a bunch of others that aren't quite as well known as he is. But everybody's favorite was always John Daly. So if he didn't make the cut and he was within 300 or 400 miles of Entourage, our vehicles where we were doing a weekend event, he would come and he had his bus that was kind of all tricked out, and he'd have some of his merchandise. He'd sell it there and he'd sing, and everybody liked it. He did actually take trim spa. Didn't achieve quite the success that Anna achieved, but he lost a good amount of weight. Really interesting personality. So, I mean, we had numerous things that we did like that.
So let's go to a 7-figure company who's struggling to get into the 8 or 9-figure range. If you're sitting behind the helm, we'll call it a supplement company because that's what we're talking about right now, but we don't have to. We could call it whatever industry that you want. What are some unique out of the box things that you would suggest them doing? And I know that that's a really blindsided question because you don't know anything about the company or what the industry is like. So you pick it. But what are some things that listen, you got to focus on these things if you want to break through the 7 and get into the 8 or 9-figure range?
Well, I think number one is the culture. One of the things that was really important to me is that everybody really owned their position. And what does that mean? That means that we have you in this position. This position has a name for a reason. So we want you to really be a great example of that position. So, for example, we had a receptionist. Well, we talked about everybody owning the position, and the receptionist thought about this and said, you know what? I'm really not a receptionist. I'm really more of a director of first impressions. So I want to change my name to director of first impressions. I said, okay, great. That's wonderful. I love the idea. And she really became phenomenal at answering the telephone. She wasn't good at it. She wasn't great at it, She was remarkable at it. She perfected it to a level that was absolutely extraordinary. When people came to the reception area, she greeted people in a way that people were amazed. Often, people would call back and say, "Hey, I called back because I wanted to hear that greeting again, and I recorded it for my receptionist." Now, what does that do? When you take a position like that and you get them to perfect it, everybody else in the company starts thinking about, how can I perfect my position? How can I pick the right words that represents my position? This is the words that the company chose. This is what's traditionally used. But what exact words, the power of words, what should I call my position? And then we want them to own that position. We want them to bring that position to a completely different level. And if everybody in the company is working on bringing their position to a completely different level, you've got beauty. You've got an orchestra that is just humming and making incredible music. Culture is the first thing you should work at. Getting people to own that position is huge. Culture. Culture makes such a huge difference. Yes, Chris.
Let me stop you for 1 second. I didn't mean to break you on culture. I thought you were going to go into the next thing. I would love to move you into something deeper for culture real quick, because it's something that you've said in the past, not during this show, but in past conversations, which I think is so profound. You need to paint a picture for everybody. You need to be the one with the biggest paintbrush in your company. And I believe that is a major constituent of culture. So can you speak about that?
Well, I always say the person with the biggest paintbrush wins, but it's not a matter of I have to paint that picture. Everyone has to paint that picture. So that receptionist has to paint that picture. She has to own that position and paint the picture and tell the team about how she's going to master that position. The warehouse manager has to go out there and do the same thing. Everybody in the warehouse. Now, you notice I start at the lower level. I start at the lower level because it's a little bit easier. The higher level people, it's a little bit more complicated. But if you can get these lower level people to own their position, that's simpler. You'll rub off on the higher level people. So now it's not only me that has to paint an incredible picture. I always say this, that you can never sell the dream too often or too much on how successful somebody is going to be, on how great they're going to be, how amazing they are. You can never tell a person too often or too much. And the more often you tell them, every single time that you tell them, a little bit of it rubs off and they start believing it. And they start believing it a little bit more. And they start believing it a little bit more. And they start believing it a little bit more. So one of the things that I like to do is celebrate little successes. I don't want to celebrate the big successes. Why? They naturally get celebrated. I want to celebrate the littlest successes. I want to celebrate not the signing of the deal, but the attempting of making a deal happen. Because before you sign that deal, it may take 10, 20, 30, 40 different attempts. I don't want somebody getting exhausted because of all that rejection. I want to celebrate. You went out there and did that, and they said no. Oh, that's great. That's great. And they're encouraged to do it again and again and again. I remember back, I don't know, about 15 years ago, two guys that worked for me in the call center started their own call center. And they asked me to do some consulting. And I said, sure, I'll meet with you guys every week for an hour or two. And we met. And they were losing quite a bit of money. And we got them to a point that within a couple months, they were breaking even. Then they offered me a position, 1/3 owner of the company, and I came in. And I told them the plan. But you tell a person the plan, but they are skeptical and they didn't believe it. So they didn't really put the plan in place. So I put the plan in place. And it was really pretty simple. It's all about recognition. It's all about celebrating people's successes. So at the time, an average person was getting like 1/3 of a sale per day. And we started to get people to a point that they were getting 2 sales a day, 3 sales a day. And we got this one guy that was starting to do 2 or 3 sales per hour. And Chris, we turned him into an incredible hero. We turned him into like incredible success. But because he started getting 2 to 3 sales per hour, everybody else believed it was possible. And before you knew it, this company was doing about $200,000 a month of profit. I'm sorry, per week of profit, per week of profit. And this literally happened in about 3 or 4 months. And they were like stunned about it. So culture will manage people. If you have a right culture, people that don't fit that culture will fire themselves. They're just going to feel uncomfortable. And the people that are right for that culture, they're going to thrive and they're going to become better than you could ever imagine. So anyway, you asked the question, what kind of things that you can do? That you got to get your culture right. That's really, really important. Number two is you got to learn how to measure. Everything measured improves. Everything measured improves. But I like to have no more than what I call 3 critical numbers. If it starts getting, and also the numbers need to be not pulley. You don't want to have pulley numbers. You want to have pushy numbers. What does that mean? Management's job is to push the numbers to everybody in the company, to everybody. Everybody has to see the numbers, and it has to be easy. It can't be something where everybody in the company has to somehow go into the computer and try to find the numbers. They got to be pushed. They got to be coming out. The call center has to have their critical numbers. Warehouse has to have their critical numbers. Customer service has to have their critical numbers. I'll just give you an example of a customer service critical number that made a huge difference. So over the years, and we continue to do this till today, measuring customer service is kind of harder than measuring sales. Well, why? Because customer service has multiple goals. Goal number one is to make the customers happy. Goal number two is to try to give as little money back as possible. And goal number three is to keep the phone calls as short as possible. So we said, how the heck do we turn that into a critical number? Well, we said, here's what we're going to do is we're going to measure our call center people on how long they spend on the telephone. We're going to say, you start out every single call and say, hi, Chris, nice to meet you. By the end of this call, my goal is to put a smile on your face. And what we're going to do is at the end of this call, do a quick survey to find out how happy you are. So immediately, this person that probably is a little upset says, wow. So their guard is down. So we do that survey at the end of the call, and then we rate them on how much money they give back. And very, very quickly, we started to find out every rep tried to make that person happy, didn't spend a lot of time on the call, and didn't give that much money. And if they got, a very high rating, they got a really high score. And when we were able to start measuring that way in a relatively short period of time, our customer service department started to do incredible. Now, Chris, I never went out there and said that we did training, but prior to that, we would train and train and train and train and train, and we wouldn't get any kind of results. We started to measure. All we did is measure. And we actually tied the measurement also to compensation. So anything measured improves. Always, every department needs to have a critical number. Overall, the company has to have a critical number, and you need to share those critical numbers with everybody. And they need to be pushy. They got to be pushed out and not pulley.
Are you the kind of company that measures more numbers or measures more actions or a combination of both?
It all depends on the position. Sometimes the position is, sales. I like to measure activity. So I don't want to measure closes. I said that before. I want to hear how much activity, in my business that I have now, which is monetized now, and it is in the radio business. We're always trying to find new radio partners and really good quality radio partners. And basically about out of every 5 new radio partners that we get, we normally get one good one. So as opposed to recognizing that one good one and rewarding the salesperson for that one good one, or recognizing that salesperson for getting 5, because those are deals that are closed. To get those 5 deals, they probably talk to 20 or 30 people. I want to recognize them for talking to 20 or 30 people. I also want to have my my recognition or my awards or bonuses tied to the prospecting in that situation. So it really depends. Science is very different. The science department is much more complicated. Your accounting department is much more complicated. It's much more difficult to figure out exactly how to reward them. So sometimes you have to do it just instinctually.
Instinctually, and your rewards are you rewarding strictly money, or are you rewarding a combination of, bonuses here and there, as well as different recognition plans or anything else?
Well, always the award that we give out most generously is recognition. And that's the award that people want the most. There's nothing more important to people than recognition, but it can't be just fake, phony recognition. It has to be genuine. It has to be real. It has to be something that they really feel is, this is definitely no question about it, how you feel about it. Some people are unfortunately really bad at recognition. I think because, yeah, actually, I'm going to say it like this. So one of the things that God gifted me with was that overall, I'm not very good at most things. And so when I see somebody do something great, I am genuinely blown away, and they know it. Really smart people, they have difficulty recognizing other people because a lot of times they say in their head, and this is criminal, I could have done better. Don't even want that thought in your head. People feel it. You need to make sure when you recognize, you really cherish their contribution and you feel it's the greatest contribution on earth. There's no one better. That's how you have to come across. But when you come across like that, it's magic.
Yeah. Okay, culture, measurement, anything else in going from 7 to 8 to 9 figures?
Well, let's put it this way. I'm going to talk about, as opposed to the figures, I'm going to talk about the people count. So right around 15 people, a big change happens in a company. So many companies that are like 10 people, 12 people, they'll say things like, I have no politics in my company. There's no politics. And suddenly they hit like 15, 16, 17 people and politics invades that company. And you really have to be ready for it. Well, how do you get ready for it? Well, it's a culture when you're small that makes a big difference. So I really think that you have to have a weekly meeting. If you're really growing fast, you have to have a daily meeting. When we were growing super fast, we would come in first thing in the morning and we would have a meeting with the top people in the company. So maybe 6, 7 people. And we would go around. What are we working on today? What stuck issues we have today and who can unstuck them within that group of people. We would do this in 5 or 10 minute meeting. And then we basically made it very clear to everyone in the company, the most important thing that you can do is unstuck somebody that's stuck. If you are the bottleneck, if you're the problem, if you're the reason that somebody is stuck, that's the worst thing that can happen. You can't be the reason that somebody is stuck. So everybody was really focused on getting people unstuck. If you can have everybody in the company focused on getting people unstuck, you're going to move at a much faster pace. So that is really important. So then you have the meeting with your team, and then each one of those managers has their own team that they have a meeting with. And it kind of populates down throughout the whole entire company. And normally within 30 minutes, you can have everybody in alignment in the company. So that would be one thing, that ability to communicate, that ability to get people unstuck. Another thing that I think is really important when it comes to politics is you got to get rid of cancer. If there is somebody, almost everybody fires people too late. They knew they should have fired them earlier and they took too long. So you got to fire people. When you start seeing a behavior that you don't like and the culture is not firing them, you gotta fire them. If you don't fire them, it's a huge mistake. I don't know what number I'm on next is, it's really important to develop a comfortable environment where people will trust what their blind spots are. So this is so important. You can preach, and I preached all the time, and I preach all the time. Use myself as an example. I say all the time, I'm really not good at most things. There's a few things I'm phenomenal at, but most things I'm blind. I do that and I talk about myself over and over and over again because I want everybody else thinking that way as well. But most people don't like to admit that they're blind in the area. And if they don't admit that they're blind in the area, they're going to do two very, very dangerous things to your company. Number one is they're not going to focus in the area that they're gifted, very, very bad. And number two is they're going to actually try to offer value in an area that they shouldn't, really bad. So how do you develop an atmosphere where people are going to embrace being blind? Well, it's not going to be like I sit down with one of my team members and tell them, hey, I think you're blind in this area. It's just not going to work. That's not going to be enough. So I really think that you have to have pretty regular 360-degree reviews, but they got to come from an area of love. People got to really feel that it's from an area of caring, of love. And so would tell over and over and over again, there's nothing more important. There's nothing greater than being able to make another person's life better. And the only reason that you're going to do that is because you love them, because you care about them. Having an organization that really, really cares about each other, that loves each other. And so how do you do that? Well, there's got to be events that you do that are not normal everyday events. So I'll give you an example. We always try to do things that were kind of unconventional. Just this is kind of conventional, and then I'm going to share the unconventional part. So if anybody in the company wants to go to some sort of seminar or some sort of learning event, it doesn't really matter what it is, we'll pay for it. We've had this policy, we continue to have the policy, we'll pay for it. But here's the deal. It's not a completely free ride. There's two things that you have to do. Number one is at our Monday meeting, you have to at least speak for 15 minutes and you got to share with us what you learned. But then you have to do a class on it. Maybe after hours, maybe during the day, whatever, you have to do a class. Well, a lot of times what they were maybe learning didn't really help the business, but it made them a better person. It made our team members better people. And we were investing in our team members. So the team members knew that we cared about them. And, this is said all the time, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. But I mean, really care, genuinely care. Or other examples. I mean, one of our team members that books hotel locations for a seminar company, her daughter has a weird disease in which she breaks her bones all the time. It puts her in a situation where she has to take a lot of time off, or we've got to be very, very flexible with her. Her name's Heather, and there's no doubt about it. She has all the time she needs. No doubt about it. We make sure that she knows that. You never have that opportunity to show people how much you care unless you genuinely love them. You can't fake it. You can't fake it. You got to care about them. So when you have a group of people that love each other, it's amazing the things that you can accomplish.
Yeah, creativity is significantly better. People will go to war for their family and their friends, and people feel great about what they're doing, about themselves, about their personal growth, about helping other people grow in the company, and about the company itself.
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure.
I'm glad you went down that path. You mentioned something about a 360 review. I don't know if you remember, but we did 360 on each other many, many years ago. I've done 360 reviews in my companies often, and a good 360 review should include, at least this is the way I feel. I'm curious how you feel on this. Should include your partners in business, investors, if you have that, your employees, your family, your immediate friends, people who are in your life, to show you a full 360 view of you as a person. And when you did one on me, I got back a stack of 360 reviews. They were friends, they were employees, there was a lot of people in my life. Yours sat on the right-hand corner of my desk for months after I went through all of them. Yours was so thorough and so truthful. It was amazing. It changed so much. And the way I did everything, as a person, not in business, as a person.
Yeah, always my 360 reviews are very long.
Yeah.
Very detailed. I take them really, what could be possibly more important than being able to let a person know where they're strong and where they're weak? I want to make sure I'm totally accurate. I want to absolutely make sure I'm totally accurate. I want to make sure I use the exact proper word. So I analyze every word and I go through every word over and over and over again. I want to make sure that I am as thorough as I possibly can be. I don't want to make a mistake, because once again, I'm dealing with a human being's life and I have an opportunity to make their lives better. And if they take that 360 review seriously and they make some changes, they're going to be more valuable. They're going to be a better father. They're going to be a better a husband or wife. They're going to be a better team member. They're going to be a better leader. They're going to be a better contributor to their community. They're going to be better in every single thing. What an incredible gift to give somebody. Just think about that. What better gift can you give somebody than that? I mean, is $1 million gift better than that gift of words that are correct, that are truthful, that can shape that person's life? That's why when we first started out, I talked about the power of words, because there's nothing more powerful.
Yeah. And the way it comes across I don't know how many of our listeners have done 360 reviews. Hopefully a lot of them. If not, I hope you do some due diligence and find really good 360 reviews out there and have them done. It's a game changer when you when you have the right people help you with it and you preface what you want to get from it. Because what I find is that, a lot of people inside of our organizations, I'm very blessed. I have some amazing, amazing people that I'm so grateful are part of the companies that I have. But deep down, no matter what position they have, deep down, I believe that many of them are either afraid to be fired, or they hold back just a little bit because they think, I'm going to read it, I'm going to see their name, which most of the time they're anonymous, but they think something's going to be figured out and I'm going to hear some truth that I don't want to hear. When in reality, the only reason why we do this 360 reviews is to uncover things that I don't see inside of my life. Like, I can't uncover things that I don't see inside my life unless I have people who care enough to be open and say, "Hey, listen, I see this trait and it wasn't a one-time thing. It's a thing you got. And this is what I see." And when you see that across the board with multiple people saying something, or when somebody goes like you, we're very, very detailed about it. And I'm like, I see that now in multiple areas. I see that. It's huge.
Huge difference. And you mentioned, what is a really great 360 review. I think the very, very best is Top Grading has one. That's smart.
Rad
He
company.
studied he studied it, and I love his. I just absolutely love his.
Are you talking about Brad the son or Brad the father?
Well, I'm talking about both of them. They're working
I
together.
know the father. Brilliant. I mean, both of them brilliant.
Yeah, I've talked to both of them.
Yeah.
They've done the perfect job. The only thing that I don't like that they don't do is they don't really review the specific skill sets that a different position needs, the really detailed specific skill sets. They review personality traits that are really important in order to bring incredible amount of value to a company. So, and you need both. You need those unique skill sets. The other thing that I think you have to be a little bit careful of is not always does everyone in a company need all those skill sets that are, more personality based. For example, I have a guy that's been with me for 40 years. He is one of the best negotiators I've ever seen. Absolutely extraordinary negotiator. He's not very good at controlling his temper. So when he's negotiating and he's in that environment, he is magnificent, magnificent, absolutely extraordinary. He gets deals. It's magic seeing him. But the way he deals with people day in and day out, he's very rough. He ticks a lot of people off. Well, but for his position, I don't really need him to be able to get along with a lot of people. I've had people over the years say, why do you even have him on your team? Well, I have him on my team because he's such a great negotiator. Well, and he's also not cancer. Yeah, is he abrupt with people? Has he made some people cry and has he upset some people? Yes, he has. But I know he's not a cancer. He's not spreading cancer around the organization. So sometimes you're going to have people that do upset other people and you got to weigh those people out. As long as they're not a cancer, as long as they're not, saying, oh, what Alex stands for is garbage, or, they're trying to hurt the organization. They just can't help themselves. I think it's okay to have them.
Hey, I have a one final question, but it's a loaded question, and I want you to be real specific on one part of it. So, what are the top 3 to 5 lessons that you think you've learned that have really made a profound difference in your ability to be successful? Now, whatever your definition of success is, one of those things at least needs to be something as it relates to mental performance or physical performance, because and the only reason why I stipulate that is because I know we're like entrenched in business right now, talking about business. But I also know that, over the years that you and I have been friends, the last decade, I mean, you've always been healthy, but the last decade or so, you have become amazingly healthy and focused on both your mental and your physical performance. And I've noticed many differences in you, since you've been focused on that. So, top 35 things that you believe have really contributed a lot to your success or that could help others be very, very successful, at least one of which has to be mental or physical performance related.
I remember Vern Harnish said something to me that really stuck, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. And he said that everyone has one great day that they can give you. And if you can pay them for that day, you'll learn a lot. And so over the years, once a month, we try to bring in some sort of guest that shares with us. So we'll have the executive team meet with them all day long. We normally bring them in on a Monday, but then they also address our weekly meeting for 1 hour. And they teach for one whole entire day everything that they know. I've hired some incredible marketers. I mean, literally the best in the world. And almost every one of them, if not every one of them, never created a marketing piece that outpulled our marketing pieces. But everyone was worth many, many times over what we paid them for the day. And some we had at our office for weeks, months. So they were all well worth it. So I guess number one is don't be afraid to invest your money into smart people. I started in my late teens trying to meet people and take them out to lunch. And I would say to people, hey, you look like I worked in the health club business. And I would say to some of the members, I said, you look like you're very successful. I would like to take you out to lunch. And, when you're in your late teens, most guys would say, all right, sure. And they want to tell you about success. They are honored. They want to give you everything that they can give you. So it's the people along the way that are going to make a difference in that journey. They're going to mold you. And you want to try to get them to mold you as early in your life as you possibly can. Because like if they're molding you when you're my age, 63 years old, I don't have that much more life left, probably 30 or 40 years, whatever. But if they start molding you in your late teens or your 20s, you can use that and get like compounding benefit, like compounding interest. So I would say you've got to, on a regular basis, try to meet with some extraordinary people. What else? I think you got to be positive. You got to have a positive attitude. Most people say I'm incredibly positive. Some people say I'm too positive. I don't think you can be too positive. Yeah, I'm incredibly optimistic. Next, you got to have a big dream in mind. Now, dreams evolve. I have at one time my dream was to build a huge company and be incredibly successful. My dream is different right now. My dream is I want to have a peaceful life. I want to go to extraordinary places. I want to be able to wake up in the morning loving life. I want to go to bed loving life. I want to be able to truly live in the moment. I want to suck every little bit out of my life and enjoy every moment. Like right now, I have a couple families of purple martins around my house. I love going out there and seeing those purple martins. I love seeing my fish. I love going to my garden. I mean, I genuinely, my wife like looks out the window and says, you really love that garden. And I do. A new flower that comes out, I get excited about it. I would say probably next, you got to get easily excited. Get easily excited. When I go out on these dirt bike adventures and you go to the top of a mountain that's 12,000 feet high and it's in the middle of summer and maybe you get caught in a winter storm in the middle of summer, that's extraordinary. That's just remarkable. Or from the back of my house, I can take my boat and go to the Bahamas and see that gorgeous clear water. That's amazing. Enjoy nature. Get excited. As far as health goes, yeah, health is important to me. But the truth of the matter is, Chris, it was important to me from my teens. I really was excited about it. But yeah, I'm now more focused on it than I've ever been. I'm very, very fortunate that at 63, I can do everything that I was able to do in my 20s, maybe in some cases better. That's not the easiest thing in the world to do. You have to constantly work at it. I work out 4 times a week, 4 hours a week, do a lot of things that make a big difference. But we live in an age right now that there's so much information that if you really want to know how to be healthy, you can pretty much Google whatever is your ailment that you have in PubMed and read the studies and really truly read the studies. And the studies are hard to read. They're really hard to read. So pretty much the first time that you read a study on PubMed, you're going to probably take you 3 or 4 or 5 days to read that study and you still won't understand it. But after you read like 20 or 30 of them, you can start getting through them in 2 or 3 hours. You know what to look for. What is having success and not having health? Health is so incredibly important. And there's some things that you can do that are pretty darn easy that can make a huge difference in your health. I don't know if you want me to go into some of those things or let people kind of try to figure it out on their own.
Know that you believe a lot in diet as it relates to health, supplements as it relates to health, breathing, sun, exercise, family, time with loved ones, setting long-term goals. I know you're very well-rounded with this stuff, but what specifically?
I'll try to go in the order of importance. So probably the most significant thing that you can do that can make a huge, huge difference is go to a sauna at least once a week for 20 minutes minimum. You're going to reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease by about 40%. But not only that, it gets the blood flowing. It's really good for your brain. I mean, there's so many different benefits to it. It's absolutely extraordinary. So that would be one thing. Next is you want to avoid insulin spikes, and insulin spikes when your glucose spikes. One of the things that I highly encourage everyone to do is go to their doctor and ask for a free continuous glucose monitor. You can get one. Almost all the different companies will give you a 2-week sample for free. You put it on and start finding out what causes your glucose levels to spike. And if you can keep your glucose levels from spiking, you're going to be much, much, much healthier. And a lot of times, everybody's different. There's when I did it, there was things that I was shocked that actually caused my glucose levels to spike. I never thought that it would make such a difference. And there were little tiny adjustments to keep them nice and level. So that would be number two. Number three, I think there's some supplements that are really important. Magnesium is unbelievably important. It is, I think, almost the most important supplement that you can take. But overall, minerals are a lot more important. Number four, you want to avoid a glyphosate. A glyphosate is in almost all of our foods that are grain related, corn, wheat, and you can Google that and find out about glyphosate. Number five, you want to really protect your microbiome. Probably the most important species of bacteria that lives in your stomach is Akkermansia. You want to increase the amount of Akkermansia that you have in your stomach. Akkermansia really loves bitter foods. So try to have like arugula on a regular basis, have broccoli rabe on a regular basis, and some other bitter foods. Next, I love methylene blue. I think it's absolutely extraordinary. I don't think you should take it every day. I think you should cycle it pretty much something like 3 days on, 3 days off, or when you really need to perform at your peak, you take it. And when you don't take it. I really like methylene blue with absorbic acid. It actually causes your mitochondria to produce more ATP, which is the energy that we need in order to function properly. Sleep is unbelievably important. There should be nothing more important than sleep. Infrared light is really important. So try to get sunlight early in the morning or late in the evening or, at sunset. What else? I think it's really important to relax. Deep breathing exercises. I try to do my deep breathing exercises at least 3 or 4 times a day. Breathing is so important and so under recognized for how beneficial it is.
Hydration.
Hydration. I'm not a huge believer that hydration is super important. I know some people are. I haven't really seen a study that has shown it makes a huge difference. I do believe creatine is really important, especially as you get older, to help hydrate your cells. So, if more overall hydration doesn't necessarily mean that you're hydrating your cells. Creatine really gets that hydration into your cells. So I think creatine is really important. Anyway, sleep, infrared light. I think working out, you want to work out at least 3 times a week. And then you also want to make sure that you relax. You've got to learn how to relax. So throughout the day, you want to take some time. I like to do my deep breathing exercises and I walk around my yard and I have different things that really relax me. And I enjoy those things. And all I do is I think about how beautiful they are. And I guess one last thing, you got to be grateful. You need to wake up in the morning and my wife and I, we pray together. And the first thing that we do is we talk about in our prayers what we're grateful for. And that is so incredibly important. I mean, you don't want to talk about how unfortunate you are. You want to talk about how blessed you are over and over and over again. Thank God for the extraordinary blessings. I mean, you may say, well, I'm in debt. I've got this problem. I got this problem. I got this problem. You live on earth. You're alive. you're breathing, you are very, very fortunate. You live in the United States, you're incredibly fortunate. You live at a time that information is available to you that can change your life. No one has this big advantage anymore like they did 30, 40 years ago with an education. You can educate yourself just as good as anyone else can. You are very fortunate. Count your blessings.
That's a wonderful way to end it. Wow. Alex, this has been amazing. Thank you so very much for sharing.
Well, thank you, Chris. Really enjoyed it.